Welcome to part 2. So the readiness of barley, it being in the ear, having a full, like a plum set of kernels, is the prerequisite for it not being damaged when it's parched. And if the barley is not full grown, it will be damaged in the parching. But if it is, it will not be damaged. To the contrary. So the readiness of barley is one of the indicators to know that we are in the right season. So this is one of the comments I received proposing that I watch a video by Brother Ricardo Garcia, and or some questions about the video. This one is from Jim. Jim was asking me, have you checked out Ricardo's latest? You may find it interesting. Blessings. So I was not subscribed to the channel, but I did take a look at the video. And I remembered that I had seen a video from him, I think from last year, with a similar teaching. So I replied, the presentation looks beautiful. The patterns are very interesting, and Nisan is indeed mirrored in Tishri. That is what he is teaching on the cyclical calendar. So he's understanding that on a cyclical view, the month of Nisan is a mirror of the month of Tishri. And I agree with the model of the earth that Ricardo is using. So if you're interested to gain some insight to the perspective of what the circle of the earth, what that means biblically, you can check out these two links on the Earth's cosmology. This is a scriptural teaching of the centrality of the earth in God's creation, both the place of the earth in the universe. It's an earth-centric model. And the model, I believe, is actually neither flat nor round, but it has a design of our inner eye. So our inner eye structure is, I believe, a microcosm of how the Lord created the earth within the confinements of the firmament. So in the description box, in addition to the article, you can find this community post and you can check out these links yourself. I believe there are also some errors in this presentation, and they're quite common. There are errors in my perspective because I think and feel otherwise, but there are more people teaching this point of view. So the blood moons, which he is speaking about, indeed occurred in line with the lunisolar calendar. And by that, I mean torahcalendar.com, because the calendar, in this case, he is using HepCal, is no longer following the precepts of Leviticus 23. So it is dislodged from Scripture. So that is the calendar that the state of Israel is using, but that has been disconnected from the Scriptures. So some are teaching that Aries is a fixed constellation for the month of Nisan, and that Nisan cannot start until the sun is in the constellation of Aries, which was the place of the sun at the time of a writing by the Jewish historian Josephus. That is a source that people often quote, which is correct. But due to the backward motion over time of the sun on the ecliptic, so the sun is moving gradually, very slowly, from left to right on the ecliptic over time, which is called the precession of the equinoxes. The position of the sun in each constellation is not static, but it's actually dynamic. So it moves backward slowly in degrees over time. So the sun used to be in Aries at the time of the spring equinox, but it is currently in Pisces. So I'm going to show that on Stellarium a little bit later. But I understand this to be intentional because it supports the account of the gospel, the age of grace we are currently in, of the redemption being marked out in Aries in Josephus' days, and now the liberation of the people of God, the believers in God, manifesting in the constellation Pisces. So the visuals for the precession of the equinoxes This is the position of the sun at the spring equinox this year, taken from the vantage point of Giza, because that is the central locality for the measurement of astronomical time. I'm going to go forward in time, and you're going to see that the sun is going to move toward the constellation of Aquarius on the ecliptic. So the planets traverse from right to left. This is the forward motion. And of course, sometimes the planets go retrograde, but by and large, the movement of the planets is from right to left. So is the sun. But the position at the spring equinox is moving gradually toward the right. So whereas the sun was in Aries at the time of Josephus, that is an accurate witness, it is now in Pisces at the time of the spring equinox. So if we move this forward over time, it's going to be a little bit wobbly because otherwise it takes too much time. If we wait a little bit, and it's going to take quite a few years, but you're going to see that slowly but surely, the position of the spring equinox on the ecliptic is moving from left to right. So this is a simple depiction of what is called astronomically the precession of the equinoxes. So the movement is very slow, but nonetheless. So here you can see the backward movement of the sun on the ecliptic. So back to the comment. I'm going to explain that by a second witness of our brother and watchman, and also a really excellent astronomer, Louis Vega. I'm going to, well, his work is linked over here. The confusion is that people who do not have an astronomy background, and he can say that because he is a biblical astronomer, do not take into account the precession of the equinoxes, the backward movement of the sun over time. It means that the sun moves from one constellation or house to the next over thousands of years. For example, the sun is now in Pisces in April, when the new year and month are determined by the first new moon after the spring equinox. As noted, of course, not everyone agrees with this rationale, but the theory is only going by one observation that Josephus made. And these watchers are taking it at face value that the sun has to be in Aries to be in the first month. Because of the precession of the equinoxes, the sun's position has moved one constellation since 32 AD, which is the year he accounts for the death of the Lord. It is for this precise reason that Yahweh, that the Lord, placed the cardinal points of the two solstices and the two equinoxes to synchronize the sun with the moon in regard to keeping the time of the start of the four seasons. Such a timepiece also served to know when to exactly celebrate the appointed feasts of the Lord. So this is only a small portion of the article that he has written on the topic. You can read about that over here. Then Ricardo speaks of the almond blossoms, and remember that in February I shared with you that at that time the almond blossoms were in bloom, not currently, because they're already in the first fruit stage of the soft almond fruits, the fiery calyxes. So right now the almond trees are no longer decked with flowers, but they are looking as burning menorah torches. So nature is speaking of the Lord's light coming forth. So the almond tree's growth stage aligns with Nisan being now. Then the other determinations of Nisan by the scriptures. There's a list of 10 markers over here in nature, varying from the storks returning, the fig trees putting forth leaves, of course the barley being or not being ready, the flowers appearing on the earth. So there are 10 markers in scripture. You can pick that article up over here. And in this link, you're going to see the reports of the verification that the wave sheaf portion of barley is indeed ready in time for the preparations being made. So I hope this brings some clarity to the issue that we are in the month of Nisan. So from the barley preparations, we go to the 17th of Nisan, the day of the Lord's resurrection. And if we go to the pattern of the days of Noah, remember that on the 10th day, they were called into the ark. And after the death of Methuselah, there was also time reserved for mourning and final preparations because the flood started on the 17th. The number 10 in scripture points to dominion, the number 17 to victory, to fulfillment and fullness. So the morning, the dawn of the 17th, when Mary, who had anointed the Lord at the feast at Simon the leper's house, she was present when he manifested himself in his resurrection body. And she was commissioned as the first apostle. She was the first eyewitness to the resurrection of the Lord, and she was commissioned to share the gospel, which we all are, right? We are authorized and called to spread the good news of the Lord's finished work on our behalf and to extend the amazing invitation to the Lord's wedding banquet. The heavens are in sync because we see a division. So the 17th has roots in scripture of division, judgment. When the Lord comes in judgment, he divides, right? His dividing sword separates. And Mercury, the forerunner planet, the messenger planet, is at dichotomy, which also implies a division, half lit, half dark, a division of dark and light. Then the day of the first upper room meeting, of course, on the eve of the day of resurrection. That is where the first spirit inbreathing of the disciples' presence in the upper room was done, the kickstart of the church before Pentecost. And the disciples were instructed and authorized to remit and retain sin. So one of the most powerful tools that the Lord has given us in our spiritual toolkit was presented to the people on the 17th of Nisan. The middle of the feast of unleavened bread, the reference to John 7:14, the middle of the feast is also like a central time of the Lord appearing. And the comet E3 in the heavens is still pointing to that 9th hour at the star Rigel, the left foot of the coming prince, coming forth in light and in triumph over the enemy. So the Lord, I believe, speaks of his revelation, not just in the heavens, but also in the books of Malachi. Mercury is going to climb to its highest altitude and greatest elongation, east, so it's going to shine super bright. Then the conjunction of the king planet and the man-child in Revelation 12, Jupiter with the sun in Pisces. The solemn assembly in the Feast of Unleavened Bread coincides with Moses' banquet in the wilderness. We have a last quarter moon, another type of division, and on Nisan 21 and 22 we have the reference to the people crossing the Sea of Reeds, the Red Sea. The Book of Jubilees specifies that to have taken place on the 21st and the 22nd. In the mirror of the Feast of Tabernacles, this is the last great day, the Hosanna Rabbah, where the Lord calls all people unto himself, speaking of himself as the fountain of living water. The next day we see a foreshadowing of the woman who was caught in adultery. The man was nowhere to be found, and there were more reasons that this was an illegal trial. But we see a picture of either being extended grace or being subject to judgment.